All right. Hello, everyone. So this is going to be the first community AMA in our Discord channel. So we're gonna, I guess, slowly build on it. And to kick this off, we'll be having Pendle Finance coming on as we host for them. Would like to welcome them to Avalanche. I think they went live 1 week ago. Is that right, guys?
Yep, that is correct.
Yeah. So welcome to Avalanche, guys. And yeah, it's really awesome seeing really awesome teams coming over from Ethereum to Avalanche. We really, I guess, would like to welcome you and I guess just hear more about you. So, just to start, maybe Tien or Dan, can you, I guess, introduce the Pendle team and what Pendle does? And just to add on my side, obviously, since everyone's in the Benqi Discord right now, Benqi is a liquidity market protocol, lending and borrowing protocol. And we've been around for almost 3 months now. And yeah, that's kind of it for now. Let's head on to you guys.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So Daniel and I were from the Pendle team. So in short, right, Pendle is a protocol that enables the trading and hedging of yield. Now, so what we mean when it comes to the trading and hedging of yield, right, is actually comprised of two steps, right? So I think the first thing first, the source of liquidity, and given the state of the DeFi ecosystem right now, typically, right, when anyone participate in DeFi venues, you will be entitled to some interest rates or yield, right? So, for example, if you lend money on Benqi, you are entitled to some interest rate. So the interest rates at the moment on Benqi itself is not, it's floating, right? You know that you're getting something, but you don't really have the ability to lock in the rates if you think that the rate is attractive. So this is where Pendle comes in. Now, as an example, right, if you think that the interest rate today, let's say for GUSDC is 10%, and you think that in the next, for example, 10 months or 12 months, right, it's going to go down. So the logical thing to do today is to actually sell away the yield exposure for the next 12 months and then get the cash upfront. So at a high level, this is what we do. Now, in order for that to happen, right, someone else has to take it from the other side. So someone else who shares a completely opposite perspective will purchase the yield exposure, and this whole thing, the transactions facilitated by the AMM that apparently Pendle currently hosts on the application itself.
Interesting. So as far as I know, this is probably something very novel that has, I guess, come over or branched out to Avalanche itself. So just, I guess, looking at it, it is building on top of current base layer protocols such as DEXs or lending protocols like Benqi. So we would like to find out why Avalanche, why not Polygon, why not Phantom, why not Harmony, or other layer twos like Arbitrum. Why Avalanche?
Yeah, sure. So the Pendle protocol was live on Ethereum in June 17th. So it was exactly 5 months ago. And when we started out, right, we wanted to focus on the functionality of the contracts. So we prioritize in making sure that the protocol works as intended and we were also focusing on user education, right? Just to get people to understand a bit more about yield tokenization, yield trading, and all these different concepts that comes with the protocol. So over time, right, with our experience on Ethereum, we gradually realized that there were actually two blockers for people to participate in the protocol. So one is that the UX on Pendle app itself is not the most friendly. It's actually pretty intimidating for first-time users, right? Because like in the absence of any knowledge about yield trading, when you see the platform for the first time, you'll probably be quite clueless. We recognize that, and we put up a solution or a shortcut, right, on our current app on Avalanche, which is in the form of a ZEP, right? And then secondly, given the gas consumption of the Pendle computations, so I think like with a surge in ETH price, right, everything else became much more costly. So end to end, it's going to cost users a lot of money, and because of that cost, right, it becomes quite limiting for any retail users or most users to even want to consider using Pendle to say lock in the rates or generate any kind of income. They are probably better off using some other protocols out there because it's I mean, some other protocols could be cheaper to use, and also maybe UX is not as complicated, right? So we recognize these two things, and we wanted to have I guess like another start for the protocol. So we did our research and we observed like the other ecosystems. So I think the Avalanche ecosystem stood out to us for a couple of reasons. We so um when we were considering the newer chains, right, there were actually two considerations. The first is that we want to make sure that as a second degree derivative, when we go to a new ecosystem, there's already an underlying layer of infrastructure that exists on the ecosystem. So for example, right, Pendle's source of liquidity is yield bearing assets from the DEXs, the AMMs, DEXs, the lending borrowing platforms, the vaults, right? So if we were to go onto a new chain that does not have very established infrastructure in this form of um, primitives, right? It wouldn't make a lot of sense because there's no yield bearing tokens, and then there wouldn't be any liquidity for Pendle, right? So that's one. And then the other consideration is that the TVL across these venues have to be sizable enough because for yield bearing assets, there are so many options, right? I guess like from a user standpoint, the user will have to maybe consider how to deploy the funds, right? And it has to be sizable enough so that we can capture a portion of the market. So, for example, if 10% of the yield bearing asset holders decide to deposit the yield bearing asset into Pendle, right? It makes a lot of difference if the TVL is 1 billion versus say 1 million, right? Because if it's 1 billion, 10% of 1 billion is $100 million. And that's a potentially big market for us to pursue as compared to, let's say, 10% of 1 million. So that wouldn't make a lot of sense. Now, so using these two factors, right? We compared across different ecosystems, and of course, like Avalanche stood out because the TVL was growing quite rapidly, and the underlying infrastructure in the form of AMMs and also the lending borrowing platforms are also up and coming. And what's more is that I think the peripheral infrastructure, say like the RPC nodes, were also quite well structured on the Avalanche ecosystem. So because like for us, right, for Q4, I think this quarter we really want to focus on the usability of the protocol. So as I understand, there are a few other ecosystems out there that do not provide as stable an experience for our end users, right? So that wouldn't make the cut. So far, I think our experience on Avalanche has been very good. And yeah, those were the primary considerations why we decided to pursue new opportunities in the Avalanche ecosystem.
Oh, thank you, Tian. Yeah, I mean, like the way you said. So I have been hopping on different chains for the past half a year, and I have to say, like, going on to Avalanche, like, just the user experience itself is super easy. Whereas if I were to, bridge over to different chains, it requires multiple centralized exchanges. So even hopping onto bridges that I'm not even sure are safe or whether my funds can even appear on the other side. So yeah, good to hear that. I guess moving on, what does Pendle bring to the Avalanche community? So there's like DEXs right now. There's lending protocols, U aggregators. What does Pendle bring on top of that?
Yeah, sure. I guess I can take that question. Um, so before I guess I answer the question directly, I guess we can go through a little bit on more details on how Pendle operates. So Pendle is as we mentioned previously, it's a yield trading protocol. So users can trade and you can either trade and hedge future yield. So you can either lock in the current rates that are trading on Pendle, or you can take a leverage exposure on the yield of supported assets, like for example, Chi tokens. So how we do it is we split a yield generating asset, for example, Chi USDC or Chi AVAX, into two tokens: the yield token YT and ownership token OT. So the yield token basically just represents the yield of that asset. So the YT holders are entitled to the yield of Chi, let's say Chi USDC or Chi AVAX, and OT holders will be entitled to uh the principal of the asset, meaning at the end of the expiry, which means at the end of the term of the contract, OT holders can redeem it for the underlying yield generating token 1-to-1. So what we bring to the Avalanche community is that we are the first yield trading protocol to go live on Avalanche. And as Tia mentioned, it makes sense for us to go for these kind of chains because primitives like Benqi has already been built in the overall ecosystem is pretty much up and running. So we can hop onto Avalanche and create another layer of yield of yield protocol where users can trade and hedge the future yield of an asset. We'll be supporting more and more assets within the Avalanche ecosystem, and yeah, expect the yield space of Avalanche to grow as we support more and more assets.
Thank you, Dan. So just building onto that, what can I do with Pendle? I'm just talking from a point of a Benqi user. What can I do with Pendle if I'm already in the landing post? Do you have like examples for this?
Yeah. So currently we support two assets from Benqi. We support Chi USDC and Chi AVAX. So what can you do with so if you are currently a liquidity provider in either of these two pools, so you're either if you're already lending in the USDC pool or the AVAX pool on Benqi, there are two main things that you can do with Pendle. You can either lock in the rates that is currently trading on Pendle, or you can take that Chi USDC or Chi tokens, deposit that into Pendle to mint YT OT, and provide liquidity to both the YT and OT pools. Essentially, you're providing liquidity to the yield pool and the ownership pool of the underlying of the underlying asset. So to lock rates right now, you can currently lock rates at about 12%-ish on GUSDC. So that's a fixed APR. That's a fixed APR throughout the next until 2023, or until whenever you decide to cash out your or whenever you decided to cash out. So you're not bounded by the contract until 2023. Or you can lock in the rates of Chi AVAX at around 19% APR. So that's fixed rate. On top of that, if you decide to not go for the fixed rate route, you want more APRs, you can decide to provide liquidity and stake that liquidity, like a typical liquidity mining program from any other project out there. And the current APR is about 150% for the GUSDC pool and 400%-ish for the GFX pool. So that's currently what you can do if you're already a lender in Benqi. But beyond that, I guess if you're not already a liquidity provider, if you're not already lending in Benqi, you can also speculate on the yield rates by buying YT on Pendle, or you can just lock in the rates of GUSDC and GFX by starting from Benqi by lending and then minting YTOT and sell the YT.
Right, interesting. I mean, this sounds like a lot of new strategies, a lot of new methods for other people to just gain extra yield on top of what they're already using or even understanding with AMMs and lending protocols. So I guess another question, or I guess something we would like to know is, with so many strategies involved in this, how should I make my decision when trading you as a user?
I guess.
Okay.
Sorry, Dan, you want to go ahead?
Sure. The trade yield. So there are a couple of things you need to compare, right? So the yield itself is priced differently from whatever APR right now that is the underlying is the underlying hash right now. So how you want to trade yield is you want to know if you want to fix yield, let's say you want to earn fixed yield, you either you compare the yield, the current APR of, let's say, Chi USDC against what fixed rate you're gonna get and see if it is worth it or not. So for example, if Chi USDC is if Chi USDC typically has an APR of about 10%, and if you're getting fixed rate of about 2%, I'm sure most people wouldn't want to do it. But if the Chi USDC APR is right now 10%, but you get the opportunity to fix rate at 12% for the same asset, I'm sure a lot of people will definitely choose the latter because it's fixed rate and it's higher than the typical APRs for Chi USDC. So that what rate that the YT is trading at, what rate you can fix rate set, is what we call implied yield. And if you go to our app at app.pendle.finance, you'll be able to see the implied yield of the different assets that we support. So you have to compare the implied yield to the current APR of the asset, or you compare the implied yield to your outlook of whatever APR the market is going to go. So the market is pretty red recently, and if you feel like lending is gonna pick up afterwards, or if you feel like there's a bear market coming and not a lot of people are gonna borrow and APR is gonna drop, you can lock in that rate right now on Pendle at the current implied yield rate. So the current USDC rate is about 12% ish. And you can essentially lock in that rate if you feel like that implied yield is a fair yield for you to lock yield at. The GFX rate is about 19%. You can lock in that lending rate as well on Pendle.
Yeah,
Pretty
so
much
I just I just want to add to what Dan has said, especially in the user experience perspective. Now, so if you look at the rates today, right, just take Pendle aside, right? If you deposit say USDC into Benqi, you obtain key USDC, right? And let's say right now the rate is 10%. So what it means is that at the end of this year, the estimated amount of interest, lending interest that you would be getting from the protocol is 10%. And this rate fluctuates up and down. And so you never really know how much you're going to get in 1 year's time. But this is based on the situation in the current environment. So I think the important thing to note here is that because the interest continues to accrue, right? You will only be able to realize the interest rate as time passes. And the distinction here is what Dan has described, right? In locking in the yield using Pendle, is that you can actually sell away the entire yield exposure for that 1 year and get the cash upfront. So meaning that instead of having to wait up for 1 year to realize that 10%, you can actually sell away that future yield exposure and get the cash upfront, get the USDC right now. So now when you do that, you're actually freeing up your capital. Sorry, not freeing up, but more like you're converting that future value to present value, and then you can consider how to redeploy this capital, right? So you're not actually bounded by time right now when you cash out. You're actually, basically the conversion here allows you more liberty on how you want to deploy your capital.
Interesting. So, like locking in yields, it sounds almost too good to be true. Is there like a catch for it?
Okay, beyond, so our infrastructure currently, that's what we allow. So for users to lock yield or to speculate on yield. I guess the catch for it is two things. First one is the normal smart contract risk that any DeFi projects encounter, but we are audited, and you can check our a couple of audit reports on our GitHub. And secondly, you can technically lose out more than what you lock. So for example, if you lock yield at, let's say, a fixed rate of 7%, and the actual APR, the floating APR averages at 10%, let's say, over the next year or so, it's not too lucrative for you then to fix yield at that rate. So you will have to have a correct yield outlook before you go and fix rate, I'd say.
Okay. Very interesting. Just going through the questions. I guess what else can you do other than locking you? Are there other strategies involved here with you trading?
Yeah, so beyond just locking yield, right, you can speculate on the yield. So like I mentioned, it's split to the underlying yield generating token is split into YT and OT, the yield token and ownership token. So if you buy purely the YT, it means you are just purely exposed to the yield part of the underlying asset. So without going into too much details, if let's say you buy the YT that is priced at implied yield of 2% and the actual APR goes up to like 10% over the next year or so, you technically profit 5x, because you're earning 5 times more yield than what you paid for. That's roughly it. So you can speculate on the yield level on Pendle. And also there are some farming opportunities that you can do with Pendle. There are also a couple of arbitrage opportunities that you can do, playing around with the YT and OT market, comparing that to the underlying price. The details of which might be too much for me to share right now. You can go to our docs, visit our docs to learn more on how to do it. But yeah, there are a couple of yield trading strategies that you can do with Pendle. So a couple of days ago, I was speaking to someone, and there's a really interesting conversation that I had, right? So how do you go about? So this person was pretty much a whale, and he's trying to divert the interest of his investments to someone else. and he was trying to figure out a way. And how he did it was deposit that yield generating token into Pendle to mint its YT and OT. So he still holds the principal by holding YT, but this YT, he sends it away to someone that he wants to receive the yield of his capital heavy asset. So that's another interesting use case that we can see with Pendle.
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, if you have USDC that is generating income, right, and you want your wife to be the recipient of it, you can do that with YT and OT using Pendle. And in that case, you continue to own the ownership of the USDC, and the interest will be streamed to, say, your wife.
Wow, like it's just like mind blowing. I guess to see how composability really unlocks a lot of opportunities like this, especially for like protocol like Pendle, which leverages almost every aspect of DeFi out there. I'm guessing this is the sort of primitive that a lot of traditional finance people would be, losing their minds about. So Avalanche in its, I guess, current stage, it's pretty nascent, so it's still quite young, like the community itself. I guess what sort of timelines do you see for primitives like Pendle to start taking off? Because it's not exactly the most straightforward primitive out there for people to understand. What sort of timelines do you guys actually see for this to start getting talked about, or even having communities adding strategies around?
Yeah, so I think it's very difficult for us to pinpoint a particular timeline. But I'd say, from our perspective, right, I wholly agree with you in that a product like ours is not exactly the easiest to understand and comprehend for most people, because ultimately, right, we are constructing a derivative. And when you trade a derivative, there are always many different considerations. It's very different from trading a spot, right? Because like if you're looking to trade a spot, if you like the price, if you like the asset, you just execute. But when it comes to trading a derivative like ours, with time put into consideration, it changes the whole dynamic. And I think this is where it gets pretty interesting and also challenging at the same time. Now, what we've seen is that as much as we have been putting up information and documentations about the protocol, it still takes a long time or quite a lot of bandwidth, right, from a reader to understand what we do and what we enable. So I think the best use case or the best use cases, right, will likely happen further down when there's a lot more comprehension around the protocol's potential. And that means right now we'll have to focus on investing in education and really build up use cases so that people understand the potential of what the product can do. So we've been investing in education. We've been going about and sharing the materials. And I think the more important thing for us is really to reduce the barriers for users to participate in the protocol, right? And I think we are approaching these in probably two ways. So the first way that I think we are that we're currently implementing, right, is for sure like education, but at the same time improving the user experience. So this is also one of the things that we want to highlight, right, in the current implementation on Avalanche, because having education itself is not sufficient. It's good to have materials out there, but it also is very important to encourage users to try out the product, because you can only read so much. You learn a lot more by experiencing it. So this time, what we have is the Z function, right? And the Z function effectively abstracts away all the steps involved for users to interact with the protocol. Now, in the past, I would say as a comparison, right, the version on Ethereum requires users about 6 steps in order to get to the desired outcome. in this case, it could be staking the LP tokens and be entitled to rewards from Pendle. So these 6 steps are not that friendly. And that is on top of the fact that every step is happening on chain and gas fee considerations can be quite material. So with a shift to Avalanche, we take away these considerations, and with the education, I think we can push for more adoption on the protocol. So that's one aspect that we're working on, and we continuously will be investing in education and improving the user experience. So basically to make it as simple as possible for users to onboard onto the protocol. Now, the second aspect, right, I think is in partnerships and having native integrations onto partnering platforms. And this is where I think it's potentially an avenue to explore with Benqi as well. So, for example, right now, users, if they want to lock in the rates for the lending, say KUSDC, they will have to go to Pendle, and then they will have to execute quite a number of things, or maybe now that we've streamlined the process, right? They just have to do it by maybe trading or depositing the liquidity onto the platform, right? Now, what if we can have the product natively integrated onto Benqi so that users, they don't have to visit Pendle to lock in the rates? If they see that it makes sense to lock in the rates on Benqi, they can just do so. Now, Benqi gets the liquidity, user gets to lock in the rates, and then at the back of it, everything powered by Pendle. I think that could be something quite interesting to explore. So here, my point is, I think for a derivative product like ours, right, it is very difficult to convince maybe retail users to participate and understand the product the way a trader or a sophisticated trader does. And I think one of the strategies that we can really consider, right, in order for a product like ours to take off, is to have a side of it be exposed to users, and then another side to be to be taken on by the traders, because traders typically speculate. So on the one hand, users can provide liquidity, and then on the other hand, someone else at the other side of the table, in the form, let's say a trader, right, can speculate on the yields, and all of these to be powered by Pendle, interfaced by, say, Benqi. So I think by having maybe a strategy like that, we can proliferate a lot more, and yeah, through all these different kind of partnerships that allow and improve user experience.
Thanks, Tian. It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because that is kind of, I guess, one of the visions we have for the Benqi platform. The fact that we will be able to use that and add any existing integrations onto the platform itself, whether it's by us or like third-party applications like Pendle. So it's really interesting that you say that. I mean, even right now, we are creating a tab just for bridges, so that anybody that wants to bridge funds over from different chains, they can head into that tab, and this tab directs them to third-party bridges. So we can see that happening in the future, especially with something like Pendle, which can offer people fixed rates, whereas Benqi's current product suite is just on, like you said, variable rates. I guess to conclude with my questions for you, what are the future plans for Pendle?
Yeah, sure. So for now, we will prioritize the usability of the protocol, right? Now, so I think we're still looking to build up some solid use cases, right? We're starting to see some ideas floating around, and the one that Dan brought up, in which we can utilize the YT and OT concept to stream interest rates to a desired recipient, that is potentially one use case that we can explore. But I think right now, what we want to do is to think a lot more about how a product like ours can be utilized at a broader scale. So we will continue to think about the roadmap. Sorry, think about the use cases, right? And really just try to strengthen the narrative. So in the next 1 year, and what we're starting to do is to think about the version 2 of Pendle, right? Because over the course of the last 5 months, we have observed ways in which the protocol can be optimized. And we wanted to incorporate the learnings that we have obtained in the last few months into the new version so that we can, again, improve the user experience and introduce newer markets more optimally, right? So I'd say like we will have a more concrete roadmap probably in the first quarter of next year, but we're already starting to plan out what we desire to achieve for the next 1 year as of now.
Thank you. So I'm just gonna pass questions on to the audience right now. So if anybody in the audience have questions, I guess you could forward a request, and then I'll bring you guys up, and then you guys can ask the Pendle team any questions.
Also, I guess feel free to ask the questions in like the general chat or other channels.
Yeah.
We'll be monitoring
Yeah.
the chat.
Yeah. So while we see if anybody has questions, maybe I have one question from myself at least. So it's just a general one. How has Avalanche been so far, and do you guys have any plans to expand to different chains after this?
So I think the experience on Avalanche has been very, very good so far. I mean, granted that we're only out for about a week, right? I think the experience from a user standpoint, from a developer standpoint, and say from a protocol standpoint, the various experiences have been very consistent, and they're good. I think we also benefited. We definitely benefited from the visibility brought about by our launch partners and Ava Labs. So the fact that we're getting some marketing support from the respective protocols, right, have been very helpful in us in providing in generating that awareness in the protocol. And this goes hand in hand with the education effort that we want to push forth, right? Because I think our protocol is still kind of not getting the kind of traction as some other primitives. So we wanted to leverage on existing primitives as much as possible to push forth a use case that could benefit users. Now, in regards to the second part of the question, right? As of now, I think we haven't really considered other chains. Truthfully, we're always on the lookout, and we constantly research and study about the other chains just so that we are aware of what's happening out there. But we do not have an immediate plan to move on to another chain just yet, because I think now is a new opportunity for us to establish Pendle brand in a new ecosystem for us. And we wanted to just focus on developing the use cases and be as useful to as many people in the ecosystem as possible.
Interesting. And yeah, it's good to hear that the Avalabs team has been supporting. Because I think right now there's a lot of requests going on to Avalabs ever since Avalanche started gaining popularity. So it's great that they're supporting a novel primitive like Pendle. I don't see any more requests or questions from the audience. So I think we may.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh,
Sorry.
oh yes, yeah. Okay, we can hear you. Yeah.
Hey, thanks. Just first and foremost, just thanks. Benqi and Pendle having this AMA. So I actually have one question, and it's quite general. So I hope you guys don't mind answering me. I tried to use the Pendle protocol, right? I do have some key assets. So I think as a user for me, right, one thing that I'm quite worried is there's I think there's one section there where you guys put out a contract period. So I think for me, right, I initially thought that it's a lockup period. So can you just please guide us through whether or not is the lockup is there a lockup on the I say 12 months fixed yield? Thanks.
No. So the expiry, the point of us having expiry is so that we don't have an infinite yield, so that the YT doesn't last forever, which is why we need an expiry so that the underlying is not locked forever in our contracts. But what you can do, you can exit the contract at any point in time before expiry. This question is also in response to Gargola's question on in the general chat. So he asked if we mint OT and YT, can we stake both on Pendle and can stake unstake anytime to redeem the collateral, and whether does the yield get redeemed while having YT tokens? And to answer both of your questions, yes, you can stake and unstake at any time, and you will still receive the yield throughout the time that you are staked in Pendle. So whenever you're holding YT, you can claim the yield from that YT accumulates at any point in time. And if you, let's say, if you hedge yield, if you earn fixed yield, you sell away that YT to realize that future value of YT into present value, you're just holding OT. Upon expiry, you'll be able to redeem this OT to the underlying 1-to-1. But if should you decide to cash out before expiry, you can just buy the equivalent amount of YT and redeem it by depositing an equal amount of OT and YT. Reason being because you minted OT and YT via the underlying, and if you want to cash it out, you just redeem it by depositing equal amount of OT and YT back to get the underlying. So again, you are not bound to the contract. There's no lockup period in Pendle. You can claim the yield anytime, and you can just cash out anytime.
Yeah, this is actually one of the main propositions of the Pendle protocol, right? Because if you look at the other protocols, derivative protocols especially, that have time element, now typically what they will mandate is for the asset to be locked up for the entire contract duration. So that means if the contract is 1 year, let's say if you deposit the asset on day one, this asset will be locked up in the contract for as long as the contract is alive. And you will only be able to see the liquidity gets released from the contract at the maturity, which is 1 year's time in the case of in the example itself. Now, so Pendle, because Pendle, as we were designing the protocol, right, we wanted to focus on the trader experience. And one of the things that we are aware is that traders do not like the liquidity to be locked. They would rather deposit funds into, say, a contract, and they want the flexibility to withdraw anytime, even at the expense of some costs, right? So they don't mind having to pay, say, like 0.1% or 2% of withdrawal fee, but they want that optionality. And this is something that you don't have with a lot of other derivative protocols in the market today. Pendle has that. And I think this is where we are also trying to promote the protocol proposition a bit more, so that we can remove that stigma or the misconception about locked in liquidity in a contract, and not having the flexibility to withdraw the liquidity prior to the contract maturation.
Yeah, it's good that you say that, because even on the Benqi socials, we have users coming in all the time asking if supplying or lending assets to the protocol has lockup periods, because I guess everyone's just so used to I guess having locked up times when it comes to traditional finance instruments like savings accounts, stuff like that. So I guess that's a giant value prop for Pendle itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to do more to promote that.
Yeah, Gargola has a question in the general chat. I'll just read it out. Okay, the second part of the question is, so if he plans on keeping AVAX supplied on Benqi from now to 2023, is there a downside with just minting OT and YT and staking them on Pendle? Well, beyond just smart contract risk, I don't think there's much downside in just minting YT and OT and staking them on. There's not really too much downside other than smart contract risk, I'd say, because YT plus OT is essentially the Chi tokens. And it's also our value, kind of like one of our value proposition for the Benqi community and Benqi protocol itself, because any usage of our protocol translates to usage of the Benqi protocol, and also existing Benqi users can come to Pendle and have more utility with their Chi tokens. So your farming rewards on Benqi. I'm aware that Benqi has farming liquidity incentives by supplying incentives and borrowing incentives. Those supply incentives and supply APR would still be entitled to OT holders, will still hold the incentive. Reason being, YT is the yield of the underlying asset, and so for Chi tokens, the natural yield will be the yield that comes from borrowing rates, and that is naturally accrued to YT. But the liquidity incentive is tied to whoever that is providing liquidity, so which is tied to the ownership, which is so if you're an OT holder, you will still be entitled to the farming incentives of the Chi tokens. So if you are to extend on this statement, if you are looking to hedge yield, which means you're selling YT away to realize that future value to present value, you'll be holding OT. And even after fixing yield, you will still be entitled to the liquidity incentives of farming incentives from Benqi.
Thank you, Dan. Does anybody have any other questions out there for the Pendle team? Especially with using the app or looking to use the app itself?
Yeah, if there's any problems and any questions that if you guys encounter later after the AMA, just feel free to hop onto our Discord. We have quite a friendly community over in our Discord. So feel free to explore our docs and explore the app. And if you're an existing Benqi user, I think it's pretty much a no-brainer to explore Pendle and see what you can do on top of it. And if you've even explored Benqi, do try it out and see what you can do with Pendle. There's quite some interesting yield trading strategies that you can do.
Thank you. And with that, we will conclude the community AMA. Thank you so much, Pendle team, for popping our cherry with the Discord community AMA. And I will link the Pendle Discord for users that are seeking to use the app or even have any sort of inquiries or questions regarding Pendle. Thank you so much, Pendle, once again. And I'm pretty sure we'll see more of you guys on the community channels and MA in future events.
Sure.
Yeah,
Thanks for having
a
us.
lot. Yeah, thanks a lot for having us. It's a great pleasure to be here.
And welcome to Avalanche again, once again. Yeah, really great to have you guys here. Thank you so much, and thank you guys for just attending today.
Cool.
Cheers.
All right. Hey,
See
thanks
ya.
everyone. See
Thanks,
ya.
guys.